Hey, it's Alex Glassy on a absolutely fabulous Friday here in Victoria, Canada. Summer day, right in front of a long weekend, and we're all feeling pretty good up here. Although nobody in the Pacific Northwest believes in air conditioning, so we're all a little warmer than usual. Anyway, I wanted to I just released a blog post on the 25 powerful trends that are already affecting your business. And I wanted to just walk through that slide deck with you because there's some more detail that, would take pages to write, but are much easier just to walk through doing this in this video. So without further ado, let me just take you through these 25 trends, which, we're already aware of most of them, but I don't think most of us haven't thought deeply about all of them. And I know that I hadn't until I started to revisit these trends and innovation and business planning for my university course I teach. I teach entrepreneurship for engineers once a year at the University of Victoria. Always a fantastic time for me anyway. And I get a chance to be live in a group of very intelligent young women and men. And we have some great discussions. And this was one of the best classes that we had. Now, the class itself took 90 minutes. I'm not going to take 90 minutes. I'm going to try to get through that in a lot less. But just to give you a sense and a flavor of what the thinking was, and I think you'll see these things are you're already feeling it, and now you'll know why you're feeling some of the things you're feeling. So the first thing, of course, is climate change. We're all aware of it. I don't think we think oftentimes we don't think too much about it, but we're again in I don't know, was it 17 years in a row of record hot temperature. It's drier when it gets hotter. At the same time, it's wetter in some places. When storms come, they're bigger, and also we have a little bit of seafall rising that's going on all over the world. Now, we just saw a huge chunk of an Antarctic ice flow peel away. And the only reason that did not raise the level of the ocean is because it was already floating. Like, it was already ice that was already floating. It was just connected. And now when it moved away, it hasn't affected anything. But if that had been on top of land and had broken off, that actually would have caused sea level to rise measurably. So that's going to keep on going. But what's also happening with climate change is that our air composition is changing. The amount of breathable gases are declining. Soil composition is changing, and ocean composition is changing. The ability for the soil and the ocean and forest to be able to deal with stuff is changing, and it's making it more difficult for our planet to keep at that nice kind of Goldilocks space where things are just right for us to be able to breathe and everything to grow appropriately. So things are absolutely changing, and they're going to continue to change. And we need to figure out from our business perspective how it's going to affect our business and what the threats and what the opportunities are. 3D printing. This is a very cool thing. I've seen some of this going on at the university. I've seen it around me. It's getting, the machines are getting faster and better and cheaper. It's producing things from, cups and flexible things, garments to food. It can actually, produce food and meals. And so as you think about how this thing approaches that kind of the Star Trek replicator, tea Earl Grey hot, and it creates the cup and the saucer and the tea and the milk and all the components instantly. What happens when we no longer have to actually ship something from here to there? We just actually ship the actual design of it, and the person on the other side is able to get it instantly or near instantly. It doesn't have to be overnight, which is still 12 hours away. It could actually be produced within an hour. What does that mean for retail, where we have to go down to the store to actually get the things that we need, when now I can just basically download the plan from the internet and print that right out on the printer that's right here, or the communal printer that's in my office. And malls, again, all this retail stuff where people go to get stuff, that is all likely to change. Mechanization. Right now, farming requires only 1% of the person power per unit of production than it required 100 years ago. And the same is also true in all kinds of manufacturing. There's some scaremongering going on there about how immigration is actually contributing to, the loss of jobs that are available for other people. It's simply not true. Number one thing that is causing the loss of jobs, in particular in blue-collar America, for example, but in other industrial areas around the world, is mechanization. I mean, walk into a European, a German automobile manufacturing facility, and you won't see a lot of people. The books to screens. This is a trend. It's a trend that I got from a book called The Inevitable, and which I write about in the blog. And in the olden days when we had a book, right? When you had a book, we would start at the beginning and we would go to the end, and the author was in control of the story and the narrative and the theme and the message, and that's how we consumed things. But now when things are on screens, even a book that's on screen, I can bounce back and forth very, very easily. I can see a link inside a book. It can take me to somewhere else to explain something or another story. And from there, I can jumping off points. So, what happens to narrative? Who's in control? How do I learn things? How do I teach things? What types of content? I mean, in the book like this, content is restricted to text largely with maybe some images. But now it's, if you see, I've just redone my website, or just in the process of finishing up the reworking of my website, because it's no longer about one story at a time that I deliver to you that you read from start to finish. It's now about a bunch of different things that could take you in a bunch of different ways, and it's pictures and it's video and it's tables and it's worksheets and all kinds of things, right? So this is as we move from hard copy books to screens and whatever the format that they are, the narrative, the content and the form of it and the control that those things all change. Globalization, of course, markets are becoming bigger. Production is being centralized and globalized. Capital, money is able to go anywhere and invest in anything or get out of a region. I mean, you can see this very, very quickly. When we have a country that's in trouble, capital flees that particular country. Whereas, 25 years ago, it was much more difficult. The money had trouble getting out, and which had a stabilizing effect. So now capital being able to move in and out freely can exacerbate highs and lows. Regulatory stuff is our regulations. We used to have different regulations in different regions of Canada and between Canada and other countries and so on and so forth. And we could go and choose the region where we wanted to operate because of the regulations. However, all those regulations, some of them are becoming the same or similar. And so I'm not able to play that game, find the regulations, which is good and ill, right? These things are all neutral. It's how they affect us that gives it the meaning as to whether it's good or bad. And of course, perspectives are being globalized in many, many ways, particularly with media. Alternative power, solar, wind, tide, batteries, human. I was at a concert down in my local market square last week, and it was completely powered. All the equipment, from the guitars to the amps to all the console equipment, was all being powered by a person riding a bike. So what this allows us to do is, as this stuff gets better and better, feedback into climate change, but also it creates us the ability to have local power security. I'm not having to worry about a blackout because something happens in New York or Germany or England, right? I'm now able to have a community of 50,000 people or 5,000 people or even 500 people, even 5 people. I can have power security that is where I'm immune to the vagaries of outside people. That's coming. How does that affect your business? Waste management. We used to take all of our waste as a city, as a community, and we would transport it somewhere else. So the fuel cost to transport it. Then we would dig a big hole and bury it, or we would dump it out into sea, or we would burn it. I mean, that's how we dealt with waste, and to some extent we still do. However, there are technologies such as anaerobic digesters where we can just take all of the waste or a big chunk of the waste, we can give it to this anaerobic digester, and out comes nothing except good stuff: compost, potable water, and even the off gases are contained, controlled, captured, and turned into some kind of power, right? So again, this allows us to create these self-contained communities and buildings, homes, and delivers is power security to us. Food production can be localized. Doesn't need to be outside in a big field. We can now create vertical farms. We can create micro production. We can create food in basically anywhere where we have a little bit of power. And so it allows us to create local food security. You know, imagine being able to have a community of 5,000 people where you're totally your waste becomes part of the cycle, and it helps to produce compost in which you're able to grow food, and it helps to power the lights that grow the food. And of course, LED lights are even more super fuel or power efficient food production. It's no longer, we should not have to bring our tomatoes up from in Canada. We bring our tomatoes up from California and our oranges up from Florida. Think of the carbon cost in transporting that tomato or that orange 4,000 miles. It strikes me as ridiculous. Tribalism, as we start to, we used to have 2 or 3 media channels 50 years ago, and that's how we were all kind of thinking the same. But now the media channels are breaking down, and not breaking down as in disintegrating, but breaking down into smaller and smaller groups, so that if you believe something or are interested in something, you can find a tribe that thinks the same way, either around the world, so a narrow group of people around the world, or locally, where we come together locally. And in this particular case, tribalism talks about local energy, waste management, food production, creating self-contained communities. But I would say that tribalism, you can cut many, many different ways. What does that mean for your business? The long tail. The long tail is you think about a curve that goes like this, where the bulk of things happen here, and then there's a bunch of things that don't happen as frequently down here. So for example, bookstores, where in the olden days, you would go into a bookstore and they may have had 2,000 titles or 20,000 titles, and they would optimize their shelf space to sell as many books or video rentals as possible. But now you get Amazon and you get Netflix, and they're able to, because it costs nothing, they're able to have an inventory of infinity. And so you can get anything that you want, even that 1952's book that's now no longer in production, but there are 3 copies out there that are used. You can actually find those, and that's the long tail. And it turns out that when you calculate it, that the sum of the long tail, the amount of items or the amount of interest or the amount of money that's able to be generated from that long tail, is actually greater than, in some cases, the sum of the big stuff, the most common stuff. And so that gives rise to the ability for Amazon to make a ton of money, not only in the most common stuff, but also even more money on the long tail stuff. And the same thing with Netflix. How can we harness that in our businesses? Ownership. Back in the day, we wanted to own a house and own a car, and we went into the store and we bought our tools, we bought our movies, we bought our books, we bought our food. But now, is ownership passé? And that leads right into subscriptions. Like, do we need to own anything anymore? Well, do we need to own a house? I know people who do not own houses. They actually move from place to place, not even renting. They actually move from house to house on a 3-day or 2-week. They're constantly moving. They don't own anything, but what they do is they take a fee for house sitting, or they found a way to turn that to their advantage, to turn this expense of renting, this expense of a mortgage, into revenue for themselves that allows them to save the money they would have otherwise have spent and create revenue. That's really creative thinking. The same thing with a car. I mean, how many people in a, I own a car. Well, I lease a car at the very least, but I hardly use it because I'm downtown and in a city. I walk everywhere. So why not just have a rental car available to me if and when I need it, belong to a car club? Same thing with tools, movies, music, books, all these types of things. Why don't I just pay a subscription fee and use that stuff when I need it, without having to clutter myself with all the stuff that I have to own, right? Although on the flip side of that, what if I'm denied access? What if I lose my Amazon account? What if I lose my Netflix account? What if I lose access to the car, to the place that I'm staying. And there's a whole flip side of that. Communication. Oh my goodness, the communication abilities between people, between items is the options are just multiplying. And of course, I'm involved, as you know, in face-to-face broadcasting, which is in beta right now and will soon allow anyone anywhere to communicate audio visually with anybody else or as many people. You can talk to your mother, or you can talk to all the mothers in the world simultaneously and have them talking back, right? So, but it's also not just communication between people, it's also communication between things. Sensors and everything else are being embedded into everything. So that, Amazon is working with a retail space where you just simply put stuff into your basket and then you walk out. But you walk out through a bank of sensors, and they scan all the stuff and scan also your wallet. They know who you are, and then they just simply charge your bank account 1 second after you walk through that scanner, right? Mesh networks, which just allow broadband coverage electronically of all the space in a building or even outside a building. And then, of course, the Internet of Things. That's what that IoT is right here, Internet of Things, which is it's putting sensors and devices into everything. A book, for example, or anything that's around here. And it's not only a sensor like an RFID tag, an ID tag that allows it to be identified, but it also is a sensor that has the ability to communicate. So the book can talk to the library, can talk to the store, can talk to, I don't even know all the things that they're going to do with it, but it's a lot. The power of the cloud, the ability to take massive amounts of data and store it there, but not only data, which is storage, but the ability to put huge, essentially infinite for any average or even above average user of computing technology. The amount of storage and the amount of processing power that's available to you is essentially infinite, and it essentially costs nothing. It's like going to the faucet and turning and water comes out, and it costs you essentially nothing. It's utility. But also algorithms that can be shared, and that you can just access those algorithms. And then on top of that, you build this artificial intelligence. So all that stuff is just available to you, that you can just, you don't have to buy it. Gone are the days when you have to buy servers and buy hard drives. It's all in the cloud now, but that cloud is getting more and more sophisticated. Decentralization, where we'd already talked about self-contained communities, but also things like blockchain, whereas centralization, like for example, money in order for money to work needs trust. And that there's an entire set of organizations that grow up around to creating that trust, so that when someone gives you a $10 bill or a 10-pound note or 1,000 yen note, that you're going to take that, and that's a fair exchange for your good or your service, right? You're happy to do that because the government and the banks and the securities and the industry and the regulators, they are all there making sure that we can't create counterfeits, that the $10 is worth it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But now along comes algorithms like blockchain that allow money, a currency, to be created, and the trust is built into the actual algorithm itself, so that we don't need governments and we don't need regulators and banks and all the rest of that stuff, right? The same thing you can use blockchain for contracts, and we're just starting to explore how blockchain and algorithmic things can be used to manage a wide variety of things. I keep my eyes on that one. Micropayments. Then, of course, if we don't have that trust infrastructure in place, then why do we have to pay so much money just to run a credit card, right? It's a 25-cent charge to run any credit card, plus 2% or 3% or 4% of the transaction, which means that I can't sell things for 50 cents. And use a credit card or a debit card, because if I did, I would lose 50 cents less the 25-cent payment processing fee, less 2%. So I'm going to lose 26 cents out of that 50 cents and only have 24 cents left over for the good, right? But if we don't have that trust infrastructure, we can drop that fee to just 2% or nothing. Let's make it nothing. And now we have, payments for anything. I can take, let's say I wanted to have this book edited. Right now, I got to pay someone $1,000 and wait 2 weeks to have them edit that particular book. But what if I just wanted to have some proofread? I could divide up the book into 100 pages and have 100 people edit one of each of those pages. And instead of paying $1,000, I would only pay whatever that makes out, $1 per each person who edits that particular page. And now when it's what's happening, I'm getting that book edited back in, let's say, an hour rather than a week. I mean, as you think through these things, you can just see that it just allows you to do things in different ways, right? Regulatory, in the good old days, it was governments that created regulatory regulations or not. But now corporations, there are some massive corporations that are way more powerful than governments. What happens, and it has ever been thus, but now it is really true. The size of corporations that we have right now and the power that they have because of the money that they have, and not only because of the money that they have, but because of their technological reach, really is very difficult, next to impossible to regulate. So think about that. Think about if there are regulations, where is it going to be? Is it still going to be centralized, or is it going to be distributed? And if it's distributed, then how are the laws? How do the courts get set up? How do you appeal something if the power, it doesn't rest with the government, doesn't rest with the courts, but rests with an organization? Like, as I said before, what happens if you get kicked out of your Netflix account? Who do you appeal to? What happens if you get kicked out of your Facebook account? What happens if you get kicked out of your house account, your residence account, right? Who do you appeal to? Wow. Financing. In the old days, financing was largely centralized. You went to banks, you went to large organizations, you went to venture capitalists, right? That's where the financing was. But over the course of the last few years, financing is becoming increasingly decentralized, and is now possible to go and raise $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, $2 million, $10 million by crowdsourcing it. And that changes. That changes how I go for financing, the types of offerings that I might want to create, the timing of my financing. Is it earlier? Is it later? To whom? Et cetera, right? All kinds of things change. And again, production. Is it centralized in centralized factories? Or, as I say, can I take the editing of my book and decentralize that? Same thing with writing code. The same thing with if I've got 3D printers in 100 different places, do I need a centralized place that's optimized to crank out high volumes? Or do I just need 100 people with 100 3D printers that are able to crank out 2 or 3 items each overnight? And that's how I get my production, my 300 or 500 units of production. And it just goes, again, how are these things affecting your business? Virtual reality. You've seen the pictures of these people with these, looking like this, right? On their face. How is that going to change travel? Do we need to travel anymore? We can just put these goggles on and walk around in our Star Trek holodeck. Same thing with training. Again, do I have to come together and train, or can I do that? Gaming, military, and even living. How do I need to? We already sit at the dinner table or out with friends with our screens in front of us, right? And you see you've seen pictures of the modern couple or modern friends, and they're all looking like this, and even communicating directly with the person beside them through their Facebook account or through their Instagram account. Well, what happens now if we've got these things on our face? What does that mean for human connection, for how I live my life? Embedded sensors, we've talked about this as well for shopping, for example, but also, just tracking the movement of stuff, health monitoring. I know that this phone, the new Samsung S8 and the Apple Watch and lots of other devices, we're now starting to wear and put around us devices that track not only where we are, but how we are. Right? What's our heart rate? What's our temperature? What's our perspiration? And so on and so on and so forth, right? These things not only can take a snapshot of how we're doing, but then if we attach that data to the cloud and create these longitudinal studies or tracking of how I'm doing as I live my days, weeks, years, and then compare all that stuff against all the other data from all the other people that are out there. How does that, is that good for me? Does that help to make my health better? What happens if insurance people get access to that and they realize long before I know that I'm prone to a particular disease or a heart attack or a stroke or something like that? What does that do to my ability to get life insurance, health insurance, that type of thing? Lots of things to think about, right? And then there's all the other things that I haven't had time to think about. And, so what else? You think about, what are the things that you see? Let me know. Shoot me an email, drop me a note, put a note underneath this will be up on YouTube. So put a note under the comments section. What other trends are you thinking about? Are you seeing? Are you affected by? Is your business grappling with? Let me know. How do these things, how do they combine? How do these things combine? How does an anaerobic digester with health monitoring stuff and the cloud, and I don't even know if those, just plucking things out of the air, right? But how do these things combine to create new wonderful things or new threatening things? And how are you going to deal with those types of things in your business? Face-to-face broadcasting is a great example where we're using a number of trends in order to be able to deliver something that's, we think, absolutely magical. It's interactive TV, the ability to go to a million people simultaneously, and yet have the entire audience anyone in the audience be able to come in and talk to the presenter, right? For nothing, for free, right? How do we do that? Well, we couldn't have done that. No one could do that 5 years ago. How do these things combine? And then what happens to just the nature of work? What happens to the nature of work? What happens to our society as all these things shape these things? What happens to our business? And what happens to us? I'd love to get your comments. Again, shoot me an email or put a comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to sign up to the blog if you haven't already. This is Alex Glassy. Thanks for going through these slides with me. I hope you have a great long weekend. I'm heading out right now for my long weekend, and I'll see you here again soon. Bye-bye.